Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm your host, Usha Kumar. Today, I have with me a long-awaited guest. That's our mayor, Mark Boughton from Danbury. Today, I'm going to ask him about his plans for Danbury for the next few years. So please join me in welcoming Danbury Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I kept the introduction there very short because I want to talk to you directly about all this. This year, you ran unopposed. There was no Democratic candidate.
Yes.
For the mayoral race.
Yes.
So you're going to be our next mayor.
I am. Yep. I will be sworn in.
And this is your eighth. This would be your eighth term as mayor.
That's correct.
And this is unprecedented, right?
That's correct.
In Danbury.
Yes.
The longest-serving mayor.
Yep.
Of Danbury.
Did not
you're very popular here.
I didn't set out to be the longest-serving mayor. It just sort of happened, but. It's an honor and a blessing to work for the residents of Danbury. I still love my job. I love what I do, and I'm just proud to be able to represent Danbury, both in the state and across the country, but also work with some just outstanding residents. So it's a lot of fun.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Could you tell us what your main plans are for the next couple of years?
Well, we have a lot of work to do, and that's one of the things that keeps me going, is that there's always another project or another area to do. First and foremost, we're continuing to reorganize city government as the market conditions change, as the revenue forecasts change. We have to make adjustments and evolve as well. And so we brought in a consulting company about 2 years ago to develop a strategic plan for us, and we're in the process of executing that plan. It's called the Playbook. You can find it online, and we're going to be executing the steps in the playbook over the next 2 years.
Does it involve outsourcing of services?
Sure. There's some outsourcing that we're doing. Right now we're going to make a decision about outsourcing our IT department in the next couple of days. We've already outsourced our dispatching and some other things. It also involves being able to just be a little bit more smart about how we do business at City Hall. I'll give you a quick example. Right now, you can pay your taxes. It used to be you can only pay your taxes in City Hall at the tax collector's office. So the city would hire a bunch of people to stand there and essentially take money and be cashiers. We now have worked closely with one of our banks, Savings Bank of Danbury, and they take the taxes for us. So what that means is, first of all, you get better service to our residents, because there are 7 locations in Danbury that you can go to pay your taxes 6 days a week, Saturdays too. And secondly, that means it's less employees we have to have at City Hall to be able to handle the workflow. So
can anyone pay online?
You can always pay online, and you can also use an ETF. I would recommend using the ETF, the electronic fund transfer. Is
it something new, or has it been?
That's new. The ETF we rolled out last year, and it's a very modest charge. I think it's 25 cents or 50 cents for the entire transaction.
I see.
The credit card is much more expensive, and people, oftentimes will ask, well, how come I can't? Why am I getting? Why is there a service charge on using my credit card? And the problem is that when you use your credit card in the store eats that 3% or 2% or whatever number that they're charging to use the card. We're not a for-profit company. We don't eat things. So when somebody uses that credit card to pay a $5,000 tax bill and there's a $200 service charge there, we eat that, and we can't. So
yeah, I noticed that when I went online trying to pay the property taxes and things, vehicle taxes.
Yeah, we recommend people to use the ETF because it's just cheaper. But if you have to, if you're in a pinch and you want to pay it, you can. Okay. And it's funny because for years our bank would eat that fee, that transaction fee, and then about 7 or 8 years ago they came to me and said, last year we ate $220,000.
Oh, I see.
And that's just not something we can budget for. So we think we got a pretty good system right now. But also, we encourage people to go to any savings bank in Danbury and use their facility, and their tellers are trained, and that's where the money is, right? So that's where you go and pay your money.
You were also going to outsource for payroll?
Yeah, that's a discussion that we're having is payroll, which is a little more complicated, particularly some of our public safety divisions. Their payroll is very difficult between overtime and there's mandated time that they have to work. So we're looking at that. That's probably a play that's a little bit longer down the line. But we have other pieces in there. We need a communications plan that we're in the process of executing, and some other folks, including a new website, some other ideas. So we're always evolving. That's one thing that we're working on. We also got a major renovation for our high school that we're getting ready to tee up, along with added capacity and a renovation of the front of the building, as well as put in a small theater up there on Clapboard Ridge. So that's something we're just getting rolling right now, and we're paving. You know, if it's not nailed down, we're going to pave it. So we're out there working hard.
So the reason we're spending so much on the high school is because of demographic changes? I mean, are we having more students now, or we're just replacing older buildings?
Well, our enrollment has gone up. In fact, it went up 281 students this year, which leads the state of Connecticut. And what's happening, there's two things that are happening. One is that homes that were 2 and 3 families are being sold, and people are coming in, and that's bringing in new people with children. And then some of our other neighborhoods, the 4-bedroom colonials, those people have aged out. They moved to Florida, wherever, and now that's brought in families. So that's one piece of it. And Danbury, you know, we added about 3,000 residents over the last 7 or 8 years. People want to live here. They like Danbury. They're voting with their feet. You know, this isn't a city like other places where people are racing to get out of Danbury. People are coming every day. You know, we have one development off of Exit 2, Rivington, where units, condominium units, are selling around anywhere from $300,000 to $700,000 a unit. So it's good to see that people want to make that investment in Danbury and believe so strongly in our community.
Do you notice a demographic change now compared to when you first became mayor?
Well, I think, you know, we're about 30% Latino, probably about 60% white, and 10% of African American, as well as other populations. I think, and that's stayed fairly constant. Although, you know, the Latino population is growing, but generally speaking, it's still very much a multicultural community with people from literally all over the world. If you picked a country or an area of the world and said, I want you to find people who live in Danbury from that area, I can find somebody. I just met a girl the other day from Siberia. So, I mean, you couldn't find any place farther away from Danbury than Siberia. And interesting story how she got here, because I had to ask, right? You know,
so how did she get here?
She decided to move to the United States and applied for a visa and got a work visa. And she picked Danbury of all the places to live in the whole United States of America. So it's an interesting story. She's going to college right now, but I thought it was fascinating to find out how somebody goes from Siberia to the streets of Danbury.
Yeah. Age group wise,
we're young.
How is it?
We have two demographics. We're a young community on paper, and we have a vibrant, very vibrant younger group of people, say age 18 to about 35. Mm-hmm. And then at the top end, we're aging. So, you know, we have a lot of the boomers now that are moving into 60, 65, 70. Mm-hmm. Those people at the top end of their age are leaving, but they're not leaving Danbury, they're leaving Connecticut. And that's because the state penalizes you for retiring. It penalizes you if you want to pass what little wealth you've acquired to your kids or your grandkids. Mm-hmm. And people are just, you know, they vote with their feet. So they're going to places like Florida and Tennessee, Texas, other places. Yes. So it's sad to see that, because a lot of them are taking pensions that they've earned, whether it be Danbury or the state of Connecticut, and they're taking their Connecticut money, if you will, and they're investing it in Tennessee or Florida. And we don't want that to happen. We have to figure out a way to keep those folks here in Danbury and in Connecticut.
So how can that happen? I mean,
well, I think
how much pull do you have in Hartford?
It's you'd be surprised what I can get done. I have very good working relationships with leaders on both sides of the aisle. People know when I call, it's not partisan. It's about Danbury, and it's a regional issue that we may have here. So, but in terms of making big policy decisions, I think that's going to be a decision for eventually the governor and the legislature. I know what I would do. I would implement a homestead exemption tax like they do in Florida. So the first 50% of value on your home, if you're over 65, is wiped off the books. You don't pay on that. You only pay on the last 50%. and then I would reimburse
You mean the property tax?
Yeah, yeah. Then I would
Well, that'll be great if you can bring that.
Sure, and I would reimburse the communities and municipalities for the revenue that they've lost.
Currently, what do we have for the seniors?
There's not a lot. Remember, we can only do what the state.
Property tax
yeah, there is.
abatement?
The Danbury, I implemented a freeze. So if you've stayed in your home over the last 10 years, your property taxes should not have gone up as long as you keep applying for the freeze. We have a number of veteran programs.
We have to keep applying for the.
You have to keep applying for it every 2 years, because what happens is people might cash in maybe they've got stocks and they, $1 million worth of stocks, they cash it in. Well, then the taxpayers probably shouldn't be giving a property tax break to somebody that's a millionaire, right? So you have to keep, there's an income verification process that we check every other year. But beyond that, we're really limited by what the state of Connecticut will let us do.
I see. There's another thing that happened recently that not many people are aware of. Danbury and certain areas north of Danbury, we ducked some casinos, right?
Yeah,
being built here on the side.
Yeah, I mean, there's. It's definitely a very fluid situation at the state level as to whether or not there are going to be more casinos, whether legally the legislature can bar and say to the Native American tribes in Connecticut, only you can build a casino. I think they're going to have a constitutional problem with that. I think there's a restraint of trade issue in there and a whole bunch of other violations of the Bill of Rights. So because you're violating the Equal Protection Clause, you can't say to one group it's okay for you but not okay for you.
I see.
That's really the basis of the MGM lawsuit, which I think is probably going to get affirmed by the judge, and the judge is going to say if you're going to have more casinos, you got to let everybody have a casino. Trump, MGM, all of the major companies. You can't just say only Foxwoods can run a casino. So
we are still not out of the woods, or we are still okay with the?
I think it's. I think it's
two Indian tribes that we're trying to.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that the process to become the recognition process, we're out of the woods.
Okay.
But I don't think we're out of the woods in terms of the fact that Connecticut, the legislature, wants more casinos because one's being built in Springfield.
They want the income?
They need the income because they're afraid that the Springfield casino will intercept people that normally would go out to Foxwoods. They're now going to go up 84. So they want to put one in Enfield or one around the Windsor Locks, around the airport. And then they're concerned about, on this side of the state, people going up the New York Thruway to the Catskills, because they're talking about opening up gaming in places in the Catskills. So the way to intercept them is to have something along the western border, whether it be Danbury or some other place.
How is Danbury vulnerable in terms of the Indian tribes?
Well,
do they still own land here?
Yeah, I mean, there is that issue, but I don't see recognition happening anytime soon for any of the tribes. So while the tribes will tell you that's an issue, if you're not federally recognized, it doesn't matter. I think the issue for Danbury will be, does Danbury want to host a casino? Does Danbury want to work with an MGM or somebody like that? Is there value in doing that? Now, over the years, I've had my opinion on a big, large-scale casino. I don't think it's the right fit for Danbury. However, I think that if there's some limited basis that it could be done and it could be managed properly, we may want to look at that. But the problem with that is it doesn't work for the operator. The operator wants a big casino, and I'm like, yeah, no, you're not doing that. So
that is one thing. Another problem with that would be you might get revenues from the casino, but then the rest of the property prices might go down.
Siting is an absolute issue.
People who are now here with children and
right, that's right. So
they would want to move out.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that Danbury, gaming, large-scale gaming is not in our future. I don't see that. I could see, again, there's been a lot of discussion about fantasy leagues. The sports leagues that I call them kids because they're young to me, but the 18 to 30-year-olds all love these, fantasy football, baseball, et cetera. There's a movement, I think you'll see a movement come up where, that'll be legalized in Connecticut. Because they already bet on it, So could you see in Danbury a pub that hosts these fantasy leagues? Maybe, but that's not slot machines and blackjack and, like what we've seen before. So large-scale gambling I don't see in our future.
I see. What plans do you have for Danbury for the next few years?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we want to execute the high school building project. That's going to be a lot of work, and I think we'll have a beautiful facility when we're done. And we're going to continue to work hard on our downtown revitalization efforts. We've got Greystar opening soon. They've got a decent amount of units already leased in that property. We also now are getting other organizations and people that are interested in coming in and opening a business on Main Street, which is great. We got to work on our infrastructure. I mentioned paving, and we're going to continue to rebuild our bridges and things that are important for our economic viability. So we have a number of different plans on a number of different fronts. I think in December I'll do the State of the City speech. I think you're going to hear some new initiatives that I'm going to roll out then that I think people will find interesting, creative, and thought-provoking. And we'll stir things up a little bit in terms of what we want to do as a community.
I've lived in Danbury now for almost 3 decades. It's a long time.
It is.
But the traffic has gotten worse. We have the same roads. We don't have anything extra. We don't have any roads going over the highway. So just to get from one end of the city to the other, it takes a long time, especially during rush hour. So are you looking into any possibilities that will ease up that?
It does. One thing I just want to note to you that most of the major roads in Danbury are state roads. People think that they're city roads. They're not. And the state of Connecticut is spending a lot of money widening things like Exit 6 at the bottom there. That'll all be widened out up to past the McDonald's all the way down to the light there at Madison Avenue. There'll also be, we've just signed the papers for them to widen Route 6, which is Newtown Road, out past Walmart in that area to keep that traffic moving out there. They're making improvements and enhancements to I-84 to keep things. The next spot will be Mill Plain Road. That'll be widened as well. So all of those projects are in progress by the state, and we consistently and constantly check up on them, nudge the state along, nudge our partners along to make sure that they're in the queue and they're going to get built. Locally, we certainly will look at what I would consider to be minor, modest traffic improvements that will fit in with what the state did. But we really have to wait until the state finishes its program before we design plans, because we want to make sure that they all work together. The biggest problem with Danbury now is that a lot of the stuff, it doesn't really line up, because the state is always off doing its own thing, and the city over decades has not really worked closely with them. So we've made a commitment to say, finish your work. Once your work's done, then we'll roll out the plans that we want to do, and which will help us move cars around quicker. And I think part of that is including and enhancing our pedestrian areas for people to walk, and also our bicycle lanes. And we need to do a better job at developing bicycle lanes for our residents.
What do you think of the recent furor over settlements from Syria, the refugees?
Well, look, I think
in Connecticut allowing.
I mean, we as Americans have had a long history of being compassionate and caring towards people that are less fortunate or that need our aid, and I don't think that should be any different here. But I think we have to be smart. And I think we have to recognize there's a couple things that we have to understand. One is that we are in a global war on terror, particularly with radical Islamic terrorists, along with groups that are like ISIS, Al-Qaeda. There's a whole litany of different organizations that are engaging, Boko Haram, that are engaging in this kind of activity. So this is a war, and we all have to put a war front out there. So now we have refugees that want to come to Connecticut and to Danbury, into the state, into the country. And we certainly should take our time to vet these individuals properly so we know who they are. We need to find out their background. We need to find out where they're coming from, why they're leaving. And then once we've done that, by all means, part of our American spirit is to welcome people here.
Yeah, and we've always had refugees from around the world.
Oh, it's been that way forever, but this is different.
And especially in Danbury, how was it before, and how is this different?
It's different because when we had Cambodian refugees coming from, fleeing the horrors of the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia, they weren't blowing people. There wasn't a terrorist aspect to this. What our concern is, policymakers' concern, is that people can use this method to get to the States as a conduit to plant sleeper cells of terrorists that may not do anything for years until they're appropriately organized and they get the signal to do whatever they're supposed to do. So here's my solution to that. Women and children, absolutely, we should be taking them in. That's part of who we are. I also believe that if you're a male between 18 and 55, I'm not really sure why you're a refugee. Yeah. You have a responsibility and duty to throw ISIS out of Syria, to fight against the terrorists. We should create a safe zone in Syria for those men, train those that would want to volunteer to work alongside with American soldiers and the coalition soldiers to overthrow those organizations. I think it's really unfair to send American boys and girls over to a place like Syria to fight against ISIS when able-bodied men are going the other way to come to the U.S. You know, people say to me, well, you know, those guys, those men are coming here because their families are here. Every one of those soldiers has a family. Every one of them is married or has children or has parents. They would rather be with their family, but they're out trying to make somebody else's country better. You better step up to the plate and do the same thing. So I believe very strongly that we ought not to be bringing males here, but we ought to have refuge for children, you know, and for women with their proper background checks, et cetera, that go along with that.
Yes, that's a good answer. And I still wonder what the rest of the Danbury people think about it at this point.
I think, you know, I've gotten a lot of calls on this one, and people are adamant toward, they want no refugees. And I would say, look, I taught kids for 14 years, and, you know, as you know, I love children. I'm not going to leave a 3 or 4-year-old on the battlefield that's an orphan.
Exactly.
We're going to take care of that child, and you never know. You may raise up somebody to be the next, well, they can't be president, but they could be the next senator or businessman or computer scientist or doctor or whatever. So that's who we are as Americans. But I just can't emphasize this enough. I believe that the men of Syria have a responsibility to protect their country, and you know, as long as they're not disabled and they're able, they need to be fighting to rid their country of ISIS. And Assad too. Assad's a bad guy too. So.
And then how much does it cost to settle one refugee?
Well, here's the interesting thing. That's a good question. So it's 12 times more expensive to settle a refugee in the U.S. than it is if they had settled somewhere in a country surrounding Syria. Now, some countries have more than done their share. Lebanon, Turkey, they've taken on way more than they should have. But other countries have done very, very little. Saudi Arabia, richest country in the world, has done absolutely nothing. Qatar, same thing, absolutely nothing. We should be holding, and our diplomacy and our president ought to be holding those other Middle Eastern countries accountable for this wave of refugees and say, you're going to help. You're going to help rid the world of ISIS. You're going to stop funding them or facilitating funding them or turning a blind eye to their funding. You're going to help rid the world of al-Qaeda and of bad dictators like Assad that are gassing his own people. You're our partner. The only way we can change this whole dynamic is by getting countries that surround Syria engaged, involved, and partnering with the United States of America. They're not going to change because of what Americans tell them, but they are going to change what their fellow Muslims tell them and what their fellow countrymen and people who are close to their country. So think of it this way. One thing if Canada tells us something, right? It's something else if a country in Africa or Australia tells us something. It doesn't make sense, right? But we listen a little bit closer when Mexico or Canada reaches out to us, and it's the same principle in the Middle East.
As far as Danbury goes and the funding, I know over the years we've lost funding from Washington, D.C., and even Hartford has been cutting down. Yeah. Can you outline very quickly, we only have a few minutes left, where the cuts have been made and why our property taxes are going up?
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially that's why you see an increase in your property taxes. This Danbury has been categorically, historically shortchanged on school aid. You know, I'll give you a quick statistic. We are the 7th largest city, probably going to be the 6th largest city in the next census, and we receive $25 million to educate our children. We have 11,000 students in the Danbury public school system. New Britain is the 8th largest city. They have about 8,000 students, and they get $75 million to educate their children. So there's a huge disparity in the amount of money.
Why is that? And how did that happen?
Well, it's really been something that's happened historically over the last 40 years. But on paper, Danbury comes out as being more wealthy. Basically, the message is, Danbury taxpayers, you can afford to pay more local property
just because
taxes.
we are in Fairfield County?
Exactly.
But then we are really not in that median income.
No, right. So that's part of the problem. So we've really tried to reverse that thinking. I think we're going to end up having to hire a lobbyist this session to look out for Danbury's interests. And we'll be working very hard on the legislature to do what they're supposed to do, which is fund education in the city of Danbury. But it's been a tough time for us. I do everything I can to keep taxes down. We still have one of the lowest tax rates in the state. We have the lowest sewer and water rates in the state. So Danbury is a good deal. I always tell people, just look around to the mill rates of the communities and the values of the houses around us, and you'll see how good we are. But we really need the state to step up and do their share.
Just one more quick question. Just in the neighboring North Salem, recently there's been a rash of, and in Richfield also, I think, there's been a rash of burglaries and then some murders and stuff. So should Danbury be afraid of safety or crime?
Well, Danbury is the safest city in Connecticut. We're an incredibly safe place to live. Having said that, you got to be smart, right? You got to lock your door. You got to, make sure that you hide your valuables. Do all the smart things that anybody would do. Don't go to dark places at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you'll be fine. I think that overall, the trend for crime in Danbury is down again this year, and major crimes are down as well. But you still have to be smart. I'm proud of the fact that this city is such a safe place. In fact, I always tell people all the time, the safest place is Main Street. People don't believe me, but it's true. If you look at the statistics, where most crime occur, it's not Main Street. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it's not Main Street. In fact, Main Street is the safest place in Danbury. So, it only takes 1 or 2 events to have people think that, it's like that. So, but we have those same problems, and we have a great police department with great men and women, and they usually figure it out.
We have run out of time. I really have so many more questions for you. Maybe you'll come back another time to talk to us at length about all of those matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
That was Mayor Mark Boughton. If you have any questions or comments, please write to practicaltalktime@yahoo.com. Thank you all for watching. Happy holidays. Bye for now.